The 2023 Oscars are right around the corner, so it's time to dive in and rank all 10 Best Picture nominees from worst to best. We're going to be talking about Avatar: The Way of the Water. We're going to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once, Tar, All Quiet on the Western Front, Triangle of Sadness, and of course all 10 nominations like I mentioned. But the most important part about doing these rankings is getting your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section, because all of our opinions are going to be completely subjective and vastly different. So if you like a movie and I didn't, that's okay. If I loved the movie and you hated it, that's okay. Definitely leave your thoughts down below, that ranking down there, because I'm going to be trying to reply back to each and every one of them, as well as make sure to also just hit that like and subscribe if you enjoy movie content over here on a daily basis. But with that said, let's get into my number 10. And at my number 10 is Tar. Now, I know a lot of people are already going to come with their pitchforks, maybe. I think to the general going audience, maybe they're more in the camp of where I am, in the more film Twitter, film cinephiles are going to be like, seriously, this is your number 10? But after seeing this movie twice, this is one of the few Best Picture nominations that I just don't really care for. I think this movie is great, but it's not to the level of like everyone loving this film. I understand why they do. I think the direction is great from Todd Field, and I think Cate Blanchett is amazing in this movie. There's something about the entire structure of the film though, and for its entire runtime, the way that I look at it is that this is a great movie that could have been perfect if the runtime was shortened down. Feels like for this entire vast 2.5 hour film, I've seen films that were longer than this that did feel shorter than this one. And I think for me, the way that I look at Tar is that each time I've rewatched it, which is twice at this point, I've watched it, I've gone, this is a great made movie. Cate Blanchett is amazing in this. Todd Field does a great job directing this, but there's something about the script that holds it back. This is again a movie that I think people will continue to analyze for the years to come, but it's not one that I really care to rewatch ever again. This does sound probably harsh because everything about this movie on a technical level is also great. It's just one of those movies, and I'm sure we've all had that, where it just doesn't click for you and it's not your cup of tea. At my number 9, this is another one that I think is great, but also there's something in the middle of it that kind of does lose me just a bit, and that is All Quiet on the Western Front. Now, as a full regard, I have not seen this one in theaters. I think if I did get to see this one in theaters, it probably would have gone up on my list, because then I would have that memory of rewatching this sort of war film in the theaters. I think war films should be experienced in the theaters, and I think that's the best way to capture it, whether it's from the production design, the sound design, the technical level, whether you're looking at the visual effects, and I can look at all of that and be absolutely stunned by it, because I do think All Quiet on the Western Front probably did have the best cinematography of last year. I think it might even have some of the strongest visual effects and production design of last year. I was completely blown away by the first act, and specifically the third act. This whole roundabout circle of what war does to people, it is very fascinating, and I was honestly really engaged with it. But there's some part in the middle of it where it just kind of started to doze me off and lose me. And both times that I've tried to rewatch this, I feel the exact same way each time I go. Right in the center of the middle of this, there's a lot of stuff that I feel the same way within the original material, as well as the original book when I had to read it back in high school. And for me, it's just that little sliver in the middle that just for some reason has never captured me as much as I wish it did. I think the directing is great, and again, I think the performance, the main lead performance, is fantastic, but there's just something about the whole roundabout circle that makes this from being not in last place that I fell in love with. I think it does have one of the strongest endings of 2022, if I was being honest. But jumping into my number 8, this is where we kind of start to get into the movies that I genuinely really like to love, and my number 8 is Women Talking. Now, I've seen this movie twice at one point. The first time I watched this, I thought this movie is incredible. I still stand by that it is incredible, but my second rewatch definitely kind of made me go, okay, this is a really great movie. I don't know if this is a movie that I really care to go back and rewatch ever again, but it is one that I think still has the strongest script, the strongest, tightest, meatiest script out of every film from last year. Sarah Polley does an amazing job directing this movie, but it really comes down to the center of her script, and this, just really much, the title says it all. Women Talking. That's it. That's the movie. It's about a community and these women having a conversation if they should leave the men. And for me, that's just such a simple premise, but when you start getting into the nitty-gritty of their conversations and how poignant it is to everything going on now, but as well as back in the day, and specifically when this film takes place, which is in around, I think, 2008, which is shocking to find out this is, again, a film that's taking place in the modern day age. I love what Women Talking was able to speak about, and I think specifically its performances from Claire Foy Jesse Buckley, and even along the likes of Rooney Mara. But for me, one of the strongest things in there as well is Ben Whishaw and how his performance goes along the likes of everyone a part of this crew. And I was just very taken back, and it's one of the quietest films of last year, but also one of the most outrageous and one of the most loudest films in what it needs to say and speak about. It's not just a film that's just about women and just them having to talk about their issues. It's talking about central issues that are still affecting from the past, present, and the future of what is going on today, and it's one of the most timely films I've ever watched. Adding in there again, I was completely blown away by the script. It was my favorite script of last year. Now we get to my number 7, and my number 7 is The Fabelmans. Now, The Fabelmans, the first time I liked it, I thought this was a really good Steven Spielberg movie. There's something about me rewatching it that really finally, all right, I get what everyone else was seeing. And I say that as Steven Spielberg is arguably the best director of all time. Is this his strongest directorial effort for me? No. Is it his strongest writing? Probably. He hasn't written all of his films, but out of the films that he has written, this is probably one of his strongest. I think for me, just to kind of get my cons out of the way, is the one thing that still doesn't settle too much with me is that sometimes it is a little bit overly cheesy. I know it is a biopic, but it is a movie that does strictly kind of layer into the cheese at times. But adding in there, the other thing that is kind of much of an issue, some of the melodramatic avenues between Paul Dano and Michelle Williams just didn't feel fully right to me. For me to even talk crap about that, let's just jump right into the pros, because I think the pros really stand out above their own. The performances from each and every person involved with this movie is absolutely stellar and incredible, and it's some of my favorite stuff that I've actually seen. Gabriel LaBelle is an absolute triumphant, and I can't wait to see what he does next, because he is a star in the making within this movie. I think the entire way that this film is structured within Steven Spielberg and the coming-of-age story of seeing someone just making movies because he enjoys it and in the backyard of his house, or getting all of his friends together to go make a movie. This is something that I can heavily relate to, and stuff that I did not as a child, because I wish I would have as a child, but as I got older and into my teenage years and really much right after graduating high school, this is what me and my friends would do for fun, is making short films and having a blast doing it. And there's just some sweet sincere about that really makes this movie the celebration of film that I think we needed last year. That when you look at everything in the Best Picture, all of these films in some way, shape, and form kind of connect to what young Steven Spielberg, young Fabelman, was doing here. And I love how they were able to structure each and every avenue of that. Now, at my number 6, we have Elvis. Now, for me personally, I think this might be Baz Luhrmann's best movie. I know that might be, again, blasphemy to many of you guys, but he's made a lot of great movies, but there's something about Elvis that just is so energetic and awesome. And that really starts with Austin Butler's performance. I mean, what else can you say about it? It is one of the best performances of last year. If he wins the Best Actor award, would I be a little bit sad that it wasn't Brendan Fraser? Absolutely. Would I be a little bit sad that it wasn't Colin Farrell? Absolutely. But would I be pissed? No, not at all. I think Austin Butler absolutely became Elvis in every sort of light. I think the way that he absolutely, not just because of the makeup or even the voice that everyone talks about, but his mannerisms. He became Elvis Presley. And I love how Baz Luhrmann was able to frame this epic of a biopic in such a way that we don't get to see these grand old biopics too much now. And while I think Tom Hanks kind of kills the movie at times here and there, I definitely think that was the one thing I would have changed, whether it was how he performed or even how the script was written around framing it around that character telling a story. There is so much to talk about when it comes down to Elvis Presley, and I think specifically they nailed almost every single avenue for it. I think this is a near perfect movie, and for me personally, it's my favorite Baz Luhrmann film. It's the one that I've already gone back to rewatch the most, and for me, it's one of the ones that I love to study, specifically down to its editing and the performance from Austin Butler itself. My number 5 now is Triangle of Sadness, which I actually just got done watching for the first time today. This is the only movie on this list I have not seen twice, but I immediately knew the second it ended that I wanted to watch it again. This is such an inspired choice for the Oscars to pick, and I'll actually look at this Best Picture lineup, and I go, this is one of the Best Picture lineups that we've ever had in quite a few years. Even though I'm, not in love with every movie on this, I think each of these movies are great in their own ways, even if they weren't for me. But Triangle of Sadness, some people might say it was my cup of tea. This was my cup of alcohol. Watching the rich, the vanity, and the greed have to fight and kind of how this all goes about in its own satirical nature is one of the most brilliant satires that I've seen in years. I even think this might have been better than The Menu last year, and that was a brilliant satire as well. Some piece to Charbly Dean, who is one of the main lead performances in here, and she was phenomenal. It sucks that we'll never get to see more of what she can do because she was great in here. Harris Dickinson was fantastic, but the big standout of this that a lot of people are talking about is, of course, Dolly D. Leon. who really much doesn't come in until the third act of this film, but she absolutely grips it by the throat and jumps right in. And she killed it. She did such an amazing job in this performance. And it's tough to talk about because I don't want to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I highly recommend you do. I'm not going to spoil it here, but I am so mad that it took me this long to watch it. It's such an incredible movie that easily deserved more nominations. Truly love here how Ruben Östlund decided to direct this movie and actually tell it in a written standpoint. How it's broken up into 3 acts, and each act is actually vastly different than the last, but each one becoming more outrageously hilarious and wild than the last as well. It starts out in the first act really much between these 2 models in the modeling world and how money and works and relationships and kind of how that whole understanding of, rich relationships can kind of go about. And then it jumps into this whole yacht and everything going on in the yacht. And I knew that's basically what I knew about the film, was that someone's going to throw up and there's a yacht involved. And everything on the yacht is absolutely hilarious because there's this whole dinner party sequence with Woody Harrelson as the captain and all this sorts of things. Absolutely hilarious. It was disgusting but hilarious. And then right after that, it kicks into Act 3, The Island. And everything on the island was even better than the yacht. I am obsessed with this movie. I love it. I'm going to absolutely be rewatching it before next week, but in the sake of rewatching and talking about movies, this had to be at my number 5. I was so blown away by how special this movie was, and if you have not watched Triangle of Sadness yet, you absolutely should. My number 4 is The Banshees of Inisherin, and every video I've done on this, I always say the director's name wrong, so I apologize. I'm going to try my best. I think I have it right. I probably don't. Let's be honest. Martin McDonagh. I think I said it right finally. I probably didn't. You'll probably let me know down below in the comment section. But this is at my number 4. This movie, I did not know what to really expect from this one. I have liked Martin's previous work, whether it is, of course, 3 Billboards, which I didn't love, but I still really liked, 7 Psychopaths, and everything before that you can even go back and talk about. But for me, this is a film that's a friendship film. One friend absolutely just one day decides to cut one out of his life, and what is the reasons for that? This is kind of a film that kind of talks about like the small parts of life, the little aspects of life, and how really precious life kind of is, and our legacy to one another. I think for me, the performances from Brendan Gleeson is absolutely phenomenal. Colin Farrell is amazing. Barry Keoghan, oh my god, is amazing in this. But for me, the one that actually surprised me the most was Kerry Condon. Kerry Condon, for me, on the second rewatch of this, really stuck out to me even more. And I think, for me, The Banshees of Inisherin is one of the movies that I didn't expect to cry in, but I absolutely did each time I've gone back to rewatch it. It's brilliant beyond belief and darkly hilarious. It's emotional and it's richly layered with themes of fate, friendship, and death. Again, I'm going to continue to say this word, but weirdly enough, it is the most emotional film I watched of last year, and I was truly taken back by it. Now, my number 3, we're talking Top Gun Maverick. I know a lot of you guys probably have this at your number 1, but Top Gun Maverick is just a film that soars and flies in every avenue, not making it just one of the best sequels of all time, but also just in general one of the best reboots for a franchise, a legacy sequel in the making. If you thought this last Scream film was one of the greatest legacy sequels, this is right here the best legacy sequel of all time. Whether it's down to Tom Cruise's performance or of course Miles Teller's performance, they're all each phenomenal. Joseph Kosinski does an amazing job directing this movie, and this is a film that the more I've gone back to rewatch it, thankfully now that I can watch it anytime I want on Blu-ray, I just love it. The sound design, the cinematography, which it should have been nominated for, the visual effects, the stunts, everything about this film can just be titled as simple but perfect in every manner that you could possibly want, and I was so in love with this one. At my number 2 now is the weirdest movie of last year, but it is one of the best movies of last year, and that is Everything Everywhere All at Once. This seems to be the big frontrunner for Best Picture, and I could not be even more excited. The second I saw this and I saw people talking about like Best Picture possibilities, I'm like, really? That film? But then I went and saw it and I'm like, this is fucking weird, and it's my cup of tea weird, but it's everything I could want, and it does deserve all these nominations, but I don't think it's going to get it. Fast forward to now, it's getting everything. It's getting all the acclaim. Michelle Yeoh deserves Best Actress. Key absolutely deserves Best Supporting Actor. I just met him, and he was one of the sweetest and most genuine people I've ever met in my entire life when it comes down to the film industry, and he's incredible in this movie. Stephanie Hsu, I think, deserves Best Supporting Actress. I wish she would win, but it looks like it could be between Angela Bassett or, of course, Kerry Condon and, of course, even Jamie Lee Curtis, which she just won for the SAG. Did I think she needed it? No, but is she great in this movie? Yeah, for the runtime that she gets in here. James Hong is absolutely great in here, but it's really much comes down to the Daniels. The Daniels directing and writing here, which really brings this entire film to life. And shout out to the editing, because this is a film that was definitely made in the editing room. This is a film that In the first act of it, it's explaining all this multiverse stuff, and it was the best multiverse film of last year. I would even go as far as say it's probably the best damn multiverse film ever made, so far at least. And looking at it, and looking at the frame of it, and how weird and wild it gets in the first hour, and you're like, what is this movie? And you're trying to catch up with it, and then it finally slows down a bit in the second half. And it takes its time with this mother and daughter story, because at the center of it, this is a family story. And all the emotion that comes out of that, whether it's the mother kind of realizing some of her regrets with her daughter or even with her husband. And being a person who tries not to live with regret, being able to see someone go through that and relive certain moments of how her life could have been different was one of the most beautiful and poignant and most action-packed things I've ever seen. This is one of the smartest indie films I saw last year, and I absolutely adored it, and I cannot recommend Everything Everywhere All at Once more than I possibly could. This is one of, again, the best films of last year, and I loved it so much. But at my number one, if you have followed me on this channel for a while, you easily knew what it was. It was Avatar: The Way of the Water. This was my favorite film of last year. I know a lot of you guys are maybe not the biggest Avatar fans. I am a huge Avatar fan. I love the original one, and I even think the second one was even better. This is everything that I could want in a story. More world building, more characters, building upon those characters are now at. Specifically, even when you look at the action set pieces and what James Cameron's able to do, the beauty of Pandora, you can never tell me that this is all visual effects. He absolutely went to another planet to film this all on. This is a masterpiece to me. Like, this Avatar film, it was the film I watched the most last year. I saw it about 8 times, 6 in theaters, the rest at home. You're probably asking, how did you watch it at home? Disney sent us some screeners to watch, but I also wanted to see how it worked at home, because the thing with that is I could just be caught up in like my theater experience, but I wanted to see how it felt at home without 3D, without a giant surround sound. I have a pretty decently good TV, LG, I think 50-inch, absolutely worth it. But watching it again at home, that love, that emotion still comes to me. And this is a film that builds and builds on each act. The first act's good, it's decent. The second act, even better, getting to see them kind of grow about. And again, it very much does feel a little bit repetitive from the first Avatar. That's completely fine. It's kind of working us back into this world. But the second the third act kicks off, and it deeply becomes emotional really fast. It is one of the best third acts I've seen in my entire life, probably top 10. And James Cameron just knows how to prove and go above and beyond. It kind of mixes every element of all of his other films, whether it's Terminator, Titanic, the original Avatar, True Lies a little bit in there. He just takes all of his craftsmanship and packs it into one of the best third acts of all time. And I absolutely loved it. I cannot recommend this movie enough if you've still never seen it. Maybe you're just not an Avatar fan, that's okay, but I can't wait to see your guys' ranking down below in the comment section. So make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and comment down below your guys' thoughts. And of course, until next time, stay classy.